Hello there, guys. This is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space, and this is going to be my January 2025 wrap-up and February TBR. So the TBR will be at the end of the video, and I'm going to update you throughout the month of January so that you can hear immediately after I finish the books, almost as immediately as I can, my thoughts. So it's almost like a vloggy kind of a wrap-up situation. So today it is January 10th. It's a Friday. I did not get a chance to update you last weekend because I was filming end of the year stuff. So let's jump into it. I finished a lot. I finished most of it 2 weeks ago, I'm going to do my best to be very fresh about it. So I'm going to start off with The Life and Death of the American Worker. I forget who this is by, but it's on there. So this is a memoir that was researched mainly during COVID, and it mainly takes place at a plant, a Tyson chicken packing plant. It's either in Alabama or Arkansas. I can't remember which one. And the journalist here basically documents some really sketchy things that happened during COVID at Tyson. And it's basically a hit piece. And I think there's some good reason for the hit piece. Like, I'm never going to eat a chicken nugget again after listening to this, for sure. Not that I do anyways. I actually don't like Tyson products. I've tried them. I didn't like them. So that makes me feel better, actually. The fact that I don't actually eat them, but I think after reading this, I probably wouldn't anyways. It's kind of gross. They tell you some of the things that have happened, like the stuff that goes into chicken nuggets, like cardboard boxes, because it's frozen. And then when they're supposed to break up the chicken nuggets, sometimes cardboard goes straight into there. And some of the stuff. It's just gross. So yeah, but mainly her concern here, the life and death of the American worker, the immigrants taking on America's largest meat packing company. There's some workers who experienced horrible things at this plant are suing Tyson. So we don't know what happens because I don't think that there's been like an end to the situation. Like, it's still being put together by lawyers and stuff. The workers are trying to kind of organize and sue Tyson. So some of the things that happened that I confirmed are that, yes, counties in states that have meatpacking plants experienced like way more COVID, way more instances of COVID. So I did do some side research just to kind of check some of what she was saying. And it says rural counties dependent on meatpacking experience COVID-19 rates almost 10 times higher than other rural counties not dependent on meatpacking. And why that happened was she was very critical of like business-friendly politicians like the Clintons and Trump, because during COVID, they supported the companies. The companies did not want to close or reduce productivity during COVID. And so they viewed their workers as essential workers. But what that meant in many cases was people were coming to work sick. They weren't given time off to recover, and other people would catch it. And so it just went like a wildfire through the workers. And workers that had risk factors that make COVID particularly dangerous were also not given leave during COVID. They were forced to come in and work. Otherwise, they would potentially lose their jobs. And a lot of these people are immigrants and refugees, and they don't necessarily know their rights. So some of the other sketchy things that happened was Tyson has on-site medical workers, nurses, who would give them things like ibuprofen and tell them you're fine, go back to work. And some of them were not fine, but they were told to go back to work. So the nurses would never say, oh, yes, this is serious. Go to the hospital, get treatment. You need time off. Those things, that's never what would happen. And what I mean by saying this is a hit piece is there are some good things that it seems like Tyson is doing. Like they do provide on-site medical care. They do provide jobs to refugees. They work with the government to resettle refugees and give them jobs. They do give their workers, children, scholarships to college. They do pay their workers more than a lot of other companies. So there's some good things that they do, but there's also some really sketchy things that they do. So yeah, she's saying basically some people died who should not have died because of the practices at Tyson working plants in it. And I couldn't find, I didn't do any deep research on the difference between Tyson and other meatpacking plants. But they were saying Tyson in particular had more issues with things like gas, chemical explosions and dangerous chemical gases, burning people's lungs and things like that. More accidents, more chemical accidents. And less concern for worker safety. There was one situation, and again, this is what I mean by a hit piece, where they were talking about how a lot of the workers do not speak English. And so there was a mistake at the plant where somebody who didn't understand English very well, they mixed ammonia and chlorine, and it created this poisonous gas. And according to one worker's account, they were told to stay in the building even though it was damaging their lungs and people were fainting. But they said, no, don't leave the building. Everything's safe. You're fine. Which is crazy to me, and indeed, there was an attempt to keep this from OSHA, and it wasn't in the newspapers when this happened, and they basically tried to tamp it down. But the fact was some workers were severely damaged by this gas problem. And some of the workers whose lungs were damaged by that gas ended up dying because they were forced to work during COVID. So yeah, that's kind of the essence of the case, and we'll see where it goes with the courts. So yeah, really disturbing, really sad. Definitely take some of it with a grain of salt, I would say. I don't know how believable some of the stuff was, but some of it was definitely confirmed by other research. And I do want to, I would say overall, I'm glad that I read this. It was really depressing. But I was like, I shouldn't let that stop me from finishing it. I should hear this perspective. This seems important to know about, And I do want to say, though, I do have a pet peeve. I don't really need to share my pet peeve. I don't need to be super negative about it. But it seems like there's this real push in nonfiction today. This is the second book in the last couple years. It has this weird tangent about how Americans eat too much meat and we need to learn to rely on other kinds of food and not eat meat. And it just feels so ableist. I struggle to find foods that I can eat outside of meat and starches. It's really hard for me to find vegetables and fruits that I can eat. So yeah, my situation with my health is I actually need meat. And so every time books mention how Americans need to learn to live without meat, and it's really a negative impact on the environment and all this stuff and on your health, it's not a negative impact on my health, that's for sure. I actually really do need meat. It's one of the only foods that doesn't bother me, So yeah, that's a pet peeve, but honestly, this was a well worth reading book if you're somebody who is interested in current events and politics in America. And if you're not, steer clear because it's disturbing and depressing. Okay. Moving on, I just wanted to start with this because I had to hold up the book and I want to get rid of it now. So, next, I just finished An Honest Woman by Charlotte Shane. This is the audiobook. I'm just holding up the audiobook for you guys. Yeah, I just finished this while I was getting ready for this video. And this is a memoir of love and sex work. I think that's what the subtitle is. So, this was written by a woman who worked in various kinds of sex work. She worked as an escort. She worked on webcams. She did a couple. Regardless, she has a lot of sex work under her belt. Now she is married, and I was really curious if her opinion was going to change by the end of the book, but it's like a wah, 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 wah. No, there's no change. I felt like the good things about this is that it's called An Honest Woman. I feel like she was pretty honest. I feel like I learned a lot about how sex workers kind of cope with the trauma of their situation. There's a lot of trauma that comes with this. And I feel like I got a really good feel for how her mind works. And at the same time, I was thinking, this doesn't make any sense. You're contradicting yourself. And it's kind of also sexist in so many ways. So let me get into that. She talks about how her upbringing, her parents' divorce, and particularly the behavior of her father is a huge thing that led her into becoming an escort. Her father had an affair. He would talk to her as a child in depth about the affair and the divorce and his feelings about all of it. He wasn't a good dad. He wasn't there for her. He didn't pay for child support. And he definitely didn't let her be a kid. And he oh, hang on. So she developed a not good view of marriage, let's say. Basically, she was modeled manipulativeness, fighting, those kinds of things. And she became really curious about she went into sex work because she wanted male affirmation. Like, she says that. I think those were her exact words. I could be wrong about it. But anyways, that's what she says. That's why she went into sex work, is because she wanted to be affirmed by men. And it was just like, her father really did her a disservice by how he treated her, clearly, or she would not have ended up in this work. So I feel like that really damaged her, unfortunately. And marriage doesn't have to look like that. And she knows that now because she's married now. It was really interesting, though, that her opinion of marriage doesn't really change. Like, she says, I was given all these negative views of marriage, but it doesn't have to be like that. Basically, she's in a loving marriage now. But it gave me the ick, because all the time that she was reading, like all the time that she was explaining her story of sleeping with tons of married men, fiancés on the eve of their wedding, doing all this sexual stuff with them. It was like, yeah, but wouldn't you be upset if your husband was doing this? And I think the answer is yes. She talks about how it's a bad idea and probably not possible to make a man monogamous at the same time that she is in a monogamous marriage. And she talks about how she doesn't want to be in charge of anyone's sexual agency, while at the same time, when she has to leave her husband for more than a week, she cries and clings to him and doesn't want that, and misses him. And then she says, I think I try to have sex like a man, so that it's meaningless. You can attach sex from any sort of meaning. But to that I say, what's wrong with having sex like a woman? Most women don't have sex that way. Can't. I would argue that she was damaged, and that's why she's trying to do that. It's because she was affirmed in that way of thinking about sex and about men. And at the beginning of the memoir, she also says, I think men are also looking for affirmation in sex, even if they wouldn't say it like that or admit that. And I don't think that that's true. So yeah, I just felt like it was very contradictory and confused a lot of the time. She seems happy at the end, so I'm glad that she got a happy ending. But I basically think, I mean, she talks about like manipulating men basically so she can get money out of them. She also has like a long-term client who becomes a friend. And basically he becomes her main support by the end of her career. They've been together for like 10 years, but he's in a committed marriage. And at the end, she gets upset with him when he stops paying her because he tries to fix his marriage. And it was like, and then she gets upset when he's dying of a brain tumor and he won't blow up his life to invite her to come by his deathbed. And she's like upset with him for that. So to me, it was like, it's almost like you're looking for dependability and stability in this man, but he doesn't owe that to you. And it seemed like basically she was telling this whole story to point out his hypocrisy because he is part of an Irish Catholic family. And he was the only child of that family who was still, in his monogamous marriage and hadn't gotten divorced. And he was proud of that in his family. And so he was proud of his sterling reputation. And that's why he wouldn't blow up his life by inviting his mistress to be by his deathbed. And it was like, why are you telling all these details about this story other than maybe to point out his hypocrisy, which is true. I mean, that's pretty gross behavior from that guy. But yeah, it seems like you're looking for something in these men that they don't owe you. If sex is completely transactional, it's your responsibility to care for yourself and find a job, I guess, continuing on with your life. And that's something as well that a lot of sex workers don't talk about, is how when you get older, your clientele dries up. People aren't as interested in having sex with you as you get older. It's just how it works. So yeah, it was interesting. I feel like I learned a lot about the mindset that you have to have going into this work. And she made some good points. But pretty much 90% of what she said was disturbing, philosophically confused, and I don't think that I could recommend this unless you, like me, are looking to kind of broaden your horizons about how other people. What I really realized through this is I enjoy work memoirs. I like hearing about like the ins and outs of other people's jobs. I find that really interesting. And of course, it's always fun to read a perspective that's totally different from your own. Like this reminds me of when I read How to Be a Woman by Caitlyn Moran, who is a UK comedian. And it was horrifying, some of her opinions. She's feminist, and but it was interesting how easy it was to read and come away thinking I feel very validated in my opinions about things, because I feel like she's really confused and contradictory. I feel the same way about this. So yeah, I don't see any growth here, but a lot of sadness, a lot of brokenness, and I'm glad that I read it though. This one, The Life and Death of the American Worker, was just sad. This one was engaging and interesting. So I think this was a more engaging choice than The Life of the American Worker. Just as sad, but more engaging. Okay, next, let's talk about The Pushcart War by Jean Merrill. I read this. This is a middle grade fiction novel. About, you can see on the cover here, there is a man with a pushcart full of flowers, and he has a pea shooter up to his mouth, and he's shooting a pin at the wheel of a truck. That is basically this story. encapsulated it into a book cover. It's a very, very accurate book cover. So this tells the fictional story of the Pushcarts of New York who were being basically trying to push. The truck drivers of New York were trying to push the pushcart drivers out of work and blame them for the city's congestion and traffic. And the pushcart drivers go to war against the truck drivers because the truck drivers started it. And so this is what the pushcart drivers do. They blow P-tax into the wheels of trucks, and suddenly the congestion is gone and everybody's happier with the state of the streets of New York. So I would say 50th anniversary edition. I think this is what you would call a classic of the middle grade genre. It was very one-sided. It was all the truck drivers, I think, except one, are like these terrible people, and it's everything is their fault. Everything is their fault, that kind of thing. And all the pushcart, drivers are like, nothing is their fault. They are great people, So, it was kind of like that, but I enjoyed this, and I'm glad that I finally got to it. Faith sent me this book because I saw it in one of her videos, and I thought, I want to read that. So thank you for sending this to me, Faith. It's a really nice copy, and it's a New York Review children's collection. I'm kind of sad that this wasn't actually true. Apparently it's been adapted quite a lot. And it's kind of like a good book for rebels at heart, I would say. But definitely like a children's kind of a book. Very like one-sided propagandistic in a sense, but cute at the same time. So I enjoyed this. It was fine. Okay, next, Judges in the Bible. I read Judges and I'm reading it again. I'm almost done with it. I'm trying a new sort of way of reading the Bible where you read a book of the Bible over and over and over. And eventually the idea is where everything is, like what chapters, when things are happening, so that you can talk about it to other people. You can point to it where it is in the Bible, and you just know the contents of the Bible better that way. So this was a John MacArthur idea. For example, if you take Judges. Judges is 21 chapters. If you split it up into 3 big chunks that you can read in 3 days, 7 chapters each. And if you read 7 chapters a day, and he was, the book that he was talking about, similar size. He's like, yeah, I could do that in 20 minutes. It definitely takes me longer than 20 minutes, though, is the thing. It took me, like, when I was trying to do this whole 7 chunk thing, it probably took me an hour and a half to 2 hours to read that much. So for me, that's just not feasible. I'm a slow reader. If I want to actually cement the details in my mind and follow everything, I'm a slow reader. If I'm just speeding through it, immersion reading it, I could probably do it in half an hour or something, but that's not really how I wanted to do this, at least not for my first few reads. I just want to pay attention and read it closely. But hopefully on successive rereads, I'll be able to get a little faster, and I won't have to do any research on the side. So I'm almost done with my second read through, and then I'll get started on my third. And his whole idea was, if you read it, you split it into 3 chunks, you read it in 3 days. Then in a month, you have 30 days. So you can read it 30 times in a month, is his idea. 10 times? 10 times in a month. So in 3 months, you can read it 30 times. And so he's like, in 3 months, I've read this book 30 times. I know it really well. I'm not really smart. It's just that after I read something 30 times, even I can pick it up. Even I get it after 30 times. That's this whole idea. So for me, it might be more like a 10 times thing. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. I'm going to try and read books 10 times in a row. And then hopefully I will remember them really well from there on out. So that's my new plan for 2025. I'm going to try doing that. So I'm almost done with my second read through Judges, and I'm excited to continue. Did I say Joshua? I meant Judges. So yeah, really some of the craziest stories in the Bible Judges has. Samson's in there. That's the one who has the long hair, and he has strength until you cut his hair, and then he loses all his strength. He's a Nazarite. Jail's in there. If you're a We Love Jenny person, Jail, the story of Jail, Jenny really loved. It's the story of a woman who she invited an enemy soldier into her tent to sleep, and once he fell asleep, she knocked a tent peg through his temple to kill him, basically. And so there's 2 chapters in Judges. That's chapters 4 and 5 in Judges, if you want to read the story of Jail. Pretty wild story. Jephthah's in there, Deborah, Eglon, the fat king who was stabbed with a sword and the sword disappeared into his stomach. So yeah, some really entertaining stuff in Judges, and it's really easy to read, honestly, because it's so entertaining. Gideon's in there. I really am enjoying Judges. Okay, next, I told you at the beginning that I read a lot. Compassion and Conviction, which I've talked about a lot on my channel, so I won't just talk endlessly about this, but this is basically written, I feel like it's a call to arms for Christians to become engaged in politics, to choose to engage in politics, and basically they talk about how to do that, how to become informed on issues, but especially how to be inspired by scripture to be involved. And he talks about how Christians, they talk about how Christians shouldn't just be Democrats or Republicans and vote along the party line. They said that's lazy. There's some issues that either party definitely has over the other, and so you can't just vote one way all the time and actually be voting along with biblical values. So he talks about how scripture should, they talk about how scripture should inform the way that you vote, the way you get involved in politics, the way you think about them. And I really love that. They pull examples from scripture and from history and make arguments that are super compelling and convincing to me. I found this really easy and accessible to read. I read it slowly because I've been posting my thoughts in Faith's Discord, and I think I'm on chapter 6, so I need to keep going so that I can finish that up. But there was only one chapter in here that I felt was a little bit light on evidence, and that's the chapter on racism. Both of these men are African American, and I feel like a lot of the times they were very focused on offering like evidence of some of their claims, and I felt like some of the claims in that chapter were like, but why do you think that? I wish they had like kind of explained it a little bit more. And I think Faith had this, like some of the same concerns with it. But Faith has read this 4 times, so she obviously loved it. And so do I. So all that to say, I just felt like so unburdened reading this. I felt like, oh, finally, a way to think about politics that's not Republican or Democrat. It's actually Christian. And it talks about how Christians often feel they struggle to engage in politics because it feels like the 2-party system divides justice from virtue. I forget what the exact word they would use for virtue, but and Christians believe in both. They believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion. They believe in compassion and conviction. So why are those 2 things separated in our national politics? They talk about how that ideally we could change that by getting involved, by being informed, and by voting accordingly. So this was really inspiring, and I read it at the perfect time, right when I was voting. And I think it helped me a lot, and I'll probably read it again the next time we have a big election because my anxiety just goes up a lot. And I really appreciated this book, and it was definitely one of my favorites of 2024. I actually finished it in December, but I didn't get a chance to wrap it up because my December wrap up was I posted it a little bit early. Another book that I finished in 2024 December after I'd filmed my wrap up was Patriot by Alexi Navalny. So this is by the Russian journalist. I've talked about this a lot as well on this channel. Alexei Navalny was a Russian journalist and politician that was silenced by Putin. He was in opposition to Putin, and he was eventually arrested on trumped-up charges and killed in prison after being denied so many rights in prison, including the right to access medical care and so many other things. And he was such a positive force for change, and he has such a positive attitude. And I was so, like, by the end of it, I was like in tears. Like, it was so emotional, but it was just so compulsively, I was like, I couldn't stop reading it. It was all I wanted to read. And it was too exciting for me to read at night sometimes because I just wanted to hear the next thing he was going to say. He just really pulls you along. Like, he's a really, really good writer. He was in the right career calling, and he loves his job. So that really helped too. It helped him deal with the hard things about his job, like being in prison, being separated from his family, and being killed. He had accepted all of that from the beginning because he knew that those were the possibilities, those were the likelihoods, and those were the hardest parts of his job. But he loved his job so much because he felt like he was doing the right thing. And so this book is a memorial to him, and the proceeds do go to support his family. So that's why I bought it. And I definitely want to read this again. I feel like I learned so much about modern Russia. He did live as well during communism, so he has personal experience to draw on for why he's not a communist. However, he actually supported quite a lot of communist politicians in Russia simply because they were the opposition party to Putin. So he got this rep for basically saying, vote for anybody except Putin, even if he didn't actually believe in those politicians' platforms. He was definitely a principle over platform kind of a guy. And I really just admired him for his crusades against corruption. That's his whole goal, is end the corruption in Russian politics, because the corrupt politicians are stealing from the people. He's like, Russia should be rich, but instead most of us are below the poverty line, and there's just some people that are uber rich. They own $5 million homes in Malibu, while, you know, Russians back home are valuing trash from the only international flight they've ever taken as like a treasure, like a beer bottle. You know, they're like, oh yes, this beer bottle from my flight, my international flight, is my treasure because it's so pretty. Like that's the kind of thing he talks about. The trash from other countries were treasures to his family in Russia. Because they were so poor. So yeah, really fascinating. He grew up like on a military base, and he just had so much interesting stuff to say about Russia. And I would highly recommend this. This was my favorite book of 2024. Yeah, that's it. That's everything that I finished. I'm sure I will have more for you by next weekend. So I'll talk to you then. Thanks, guys. Hey there, guys. This is Christy Lewis from Dostoevsky in Space. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I can't use my audio equipment right now because, and hopefully I'm not too blown out either. Yeah, I think I am, but oh well. I can't use my audio equipment right now because my laptop is not available. I can't use it right now. Really hoping it's better in time for a live show. I hope that IT can fix it, but we'll see. But anyways, we're sitting on the deck today because it's nice and I want to be outside. And I probably will get interrupted because a friend's coming over and she just said, oh, I'm coming way early. So, which I'm totally happy about. That's fine with me. But, so we're just going to do our best to get through some stuff. And I wanted to say, oh yeah, today is Wednesday, January 22nd. So hopefully I'll be able to do one more update before this goes up. But Yeah, Mimi. I wanted to say huge thanks to Mimi because she sent me an Octo Buddy, which I meant to actually bring out with me and show you guys. But it's like you stick it to a mirror and it holds your phone on the mirror. And I got it so that I can do Get Ready With Me more easily, and also so that I can film in the car more easily. So I'm really grateful for that, because normally I just have stuff stacked on, I have like my camera or my phone stacked on stuff, you know, when I'm doing Get Ready With Me. So yeah, excited for that, to use that. And right now I'm not using makeup because I'm having some kind of skin eruption around my eyes. We're not really sure what's going on there, but it might just be an autoimmune thing that, you know, whatever. So I can't wear makeup. I don't know when I'll be able to again. So you're gonna see a lot of bare-faced Christy. Oh yeah, I was gonna take off my glasses. Okay. I've become aware that that's apparently like expected when you're trying to look nice. I don't know that I'm trying to look nice, but I didn't even know that for a long time. I was just like, no, glasses, that's my face. They're like attached to my face. But I'm not gonna use contacts just for filming a fun video because they're more expensive than glasses. So anyways, moving on. Let's talk about the books. So first, I finished Eruption by Michael Creighton. This is a thriller, and James Patterson. So it was conceptualized and researched by Michael Creighton before he died, and then finished by James Patterson. It was actually Michael Crichton's wife who selected James Patterson as the person to finish it. I just realized I didn't do my nails again either. I'm a mess today, sorry. This was pretty fun. Not gonna lie, I had fun with this. I don't know that it's gonna stick with me. Like, there was no emotional impact at all with the characters. None. Like, I don't really want to spoil how things go, but when bad things happen to characters, I didn't care. I didn't even know who half of them were because I was just listening to it on audio. But there was like a side storyline happening in addition to the eruption. And that was just as interesting as the volcanic part. And I think you can sort of tell that Michael Creighton was almost more interested in this parallel plot. So I don't know that Eruption is like the best. I mean, this is probably like the main event of the novel is an eruption, which it was one of the volcanoes on Hawaii. I think the big one. So that does happen, and it is the main event. But I feel like he was even maybe a little more interested in a parallel side plot. So anyways, I enjoyed this, and I would probably rate it like around 3 stars. And I pretty much finished it because I am interested in volcanoes. I think volcanoes are really interesting. Natural disasters, period, I think are really interesting. So basically, the content interested me, even though the execution was like 3-star level. So I don't know that I would recommend it unless you, like me, are very interested in volcanoes, but it was fun. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I just listened to it for relaxation. Okay, next. This is sad. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. So I DNF'd this at 48%. So I got halfway through it before finally giving up. I honestly, it was just dull. It was just really dull. I really wanted to love it. I did love the beginning, and there were parts that I loved. But it's so wordy. There's so much that I don't care about at all, and I find David Copperfield to be a really dull narrator. I think he's a first-person narrator. Yeah, it's a first-person narration, and the narrator is boring. When it's a first-person narrator now, like for modern books, it's that way because the author has a really strong author's voice, and they want to convey the character, the personality, humor. I mean, there's like a reason why they choose first person. I don't think there was any reason why why this should have been written in first person. I really wanted to like this because I loved Bleak House so much, but Bleak House was like masterfully orchestrated. You could see that there were plot elements happening. You couldn't necessarily see what was all going to happen all the time, but you could see it developing. David Copperfield, the only forward development is David gets older and things happen in his life. There is no plot. It's just David getting older. I guess that is a plot. If all you care about is characterization, there's a plot. But I don't just care about characterization, unfortunately. I can handle depressing sad if it's interesting, if I find it really funny. There's funny parts in here, definitely. But it wasn't like the whole book was funny. There's funny moments. There's a lot of like moments where you're just like, not this again, not this person again. So yeah, I just, there wasn't enough to love for me. And this is making me convinced that I'm not a Dickens girly. Bleak House was an exception to the rule. I've read several other things by Dickens, and I think Bleak House was definitely my favorite. And then A Tale of Two Cities, I didn't care about until the ending. And then I loved the ending so much that I was like, 5 stars, this ending is crazy. So I really wanted to give this a really good shot because maybe the ending would be great. But I'm not willing to listen to, like, I don't know how many hours, 20 more hours or something of the audiobook. I don't know exactly how many hours, but it's really long is what I'm getting at. And there's not enough bang for your buck. Yeah. You could really feel the length with it, unfortunately. So that's that. Unfortunately, I really wanted to love that. Okay. Next, let's talk about The Double by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Now, this is interesting because I soft DNF'd this. And honestly, if I hear somebody tell me that the ending of David Copperfield makes it all worth it, and somebody reviews it, and they're like, just hang on till the ending, it'll make it all worth it, I could maybe give it a chance. It's not like a hard DNF. I'm just really tired of it, and it's honestly dragging me down. I don't want to listen to it. I'm only listening to it because I feel like I have to get through it so I can move on to something I like better. Yeah. Anyways, The Double was a soft DNF for me in 2024 because there's a lot of off-putting elements. The repetition of character names. Of course, Dostoevsky's characters are often off-putting in and of themselves. There's some off-putting elements. But the nice thing is it is very short. So when I decided, okay, I'm 85% through this, I just want to finish it, I was able to do that real easily. And I did it for We Love Jenny. And I'm so glad that I did. Honestly, when I first finished it, I was like, oh, okay. And then what was nice is I was listening to the audiobook on YouTube that's narrated by Hippias Minor, whose channel is fantastic. Go subscribe to him if you're a Dostoevsky fan. He narrates these beautifully in so many of Dostoevsky's books. And he has notes sometimes at the end of each chapter. He'll sometimes throw in a couple notes. And then at the end of the book, he does a whole separate video sharing his thoughts about the book. And that was so incredibly helpful. Like, he talks about the polyphony that Dostoevsky's characters often portray. They often talk to each other. They talk to themselves, and they contradict themselves. And you're like, okay, he said this, but he also said this. Which one is right? It's a very modernist kind of writing style. And he like compares it to James Joyce and all these other modernist authors. And he kind of, it's interesting. He said it almost on like a scale of how modern it is in that way, the polyphony. So that was really interesting. And I feel like there was something else really interesting too. I forget what it was. Hang on. Oh yeah, it is a mystery story. So this is what I found particularly interesting. A lot of Dostoevsky stories have mystery elements, which is great. I think it really helps me move forward with a story. It propels you forward. You want to find out the solution to the mystery. So the mystery in this book is the double real? Is the main character actually seeing a double of himself? Is the double actually ruining his life? And I was taking some of the evidence as, yes, of course he exists. But the video kind of talks about some of the reasons why maybe he doesn't actually exist. Why it's not, like, the narrator is not trustworthy. He's unreliable. So I really enjoyed his breakdown of it, and it took it from a 3-star to a 4-star. I initially DNF'd it because I was like, this is a 3-star. After listening to that video, I was like, 4 stars. And I kind of want to go back and reread it, but probably in a different translation. This is the Constance Garnett translation, and I believe that's the one he read as well. And it was fine. I think it's just the story that can be off-putting. It's not the translation. But I'll probably try it in a different translation that's more maybe modern feeling. I think that's kind of the mood that I'm in lately. I need more accessible things at the moment. I'm really having a hard time reading classics right now. And that's fine. That's just life sometimes. When life is stressful, you need relaxing, easy books to read. So I am living it up right now with Oathbringer. I'm in the Sanderlanche of Oathbringer. I'm like 85% in. Okay. Next, let's talk about The Night Fire by Michael Connolly. This is a police procedural mystery series that I'm reading with my husband. Whenever we are driving to my medical appointments or on vacation drives, we listen to this. So when we went and visited Victoria both times in 2024, we were listening to this together. And it just really makes for some great memories. It has been so fun for me to discover Kevin's taste in books, and this series is like right on target for him. The first book that we read, I think it was like 2 books after this one. We accidentally started like late into the series, and we didn't realize it at the time, which is funny because I hauled it. So yeah. Where was I going with that? I can't remember. Anyways, oh yeah, the first one that we started with, it started slow. We weren't sure if we were going to like it. And then his endings are great. And so everything started to come together at the end. Like probably the last 40% of these books is always really good because everything's coming together. So, but there's good stuff in the 60% too, but they are pretty long. They're like 10 hours or 12 hours long. That's not that long, but you know. Yeah, so this one, very similar. So we are following Harry Bosch and Renee Ballard. Harry Bosch is a retired detective. He has his own whole series. This is part of Renee Ballard's series. And she is currently in the force in LA. I think she's LAPD. Is she LAPD? She's actually a detective. And he is a retired detective, Harry Bosch is. And so they're working together. And Harry Bosch has a certain disregard for the rules, very Harry Potter-like. And Renee Ballard doesn't. Like, she follows the rules really well. So their dynamics are really interesting. See how they get things done, how they rely on each other and trust each other. Some of the decisions Harry Bosch makes that are questionable, that probably are what got him fired. We don't actually know what happened, because we haven't read the whole Harry Bosch series. But Kevin is loving it. My eyes glaze over a little bit with all the details, but the endings are always really good. And it's kind of like at a certain point in life, you just want your loved ones to be happy. And if they're happy, you're happy too. He says that about me all the time. It's like, as long as my wife is happy, I'm happy. And I feel the same way with him. Like, these are 3-star books for me, but I'm happy that he's enjoying them so much, and that elevates the experience for me. And so I'm happy to listen to them with him. So that is that. And the last book that I finished is Rouge by Mona Awad. I haven't finished it. I DNF'd this at, I think, 40%. So I did give it a good... No. This one was like maybe 30%. It was a little earlier. I feel like I gave it a pretty good go, though. Maybe I only needed one Mona Awad in my life and I don't need another one. This is that same sort of surrealist feel as Bunny. But this one is about a young woman who's just lost her mother, and there's a bit of a mystery what happened to her mother. She sort of wants to know. And it's a very clever satire of the skincare industry. That part was interesting. But other than those things, I mean, it was like the same thing for like 30% or however much I read it. There wasn't really much new happening. There wasn't anything happening. Nothing was happening. It was just the same thing over and over. And I was like, I don't think those are enough to pull me through the entire book. It's not a short book. So with Bunny, I felt like there was a lot happening. A lot of interesting character things happening. In this one, not so much. Yeah. So I ended up DNFing it. It's just not in line with my interests at all. However, it's not a bad book. I wouldn't say it's a bad book. It's just not for me. I might try another Mona Awad. I've heard interesting things about All's Well, with the chronic illness element. I might try that one. It might be more up my alley than this one. This one, yeah, it's basically satirizing the skincare industry, and that's, I feel like, most of what it had going on. It's very immersive in that sense. She never breaks tone. It's just, it's like a perfect satire, I would say, but satire isn't my normal thing. So, yep, that's it. And I can't believe I finished before my friend got here. So I will update you guys again before the end of the month. Hey guys, well, here's my Octo Buddy. So I'm using it on my phone right now. So I just wanted to update you because I forgot to tell you about a book when I filmed yesterday. I almost thought about refilming because the lighting was awful, but it is what it is. I'm just going to keep it because I don't have that much time. Okay, so I'm going to be doing my bangs while we're talking. So the other thing that I read, at least some of, is We've Got Issues by Dr. Phil, which I have never really watched, or I don't know. I don't really know Dr. Phil, but I was curious to hear what he thought America's issues were. It's basically like him talking about the issues that he feels like America has. And so because I'd never watched him, or maybe because he's never talked about those things before, I had no idea what his opinions were. Well, his opinions became clear pretty quickly. Hang on. And it's not that I disagree with him, but he wasn't citing any evidence. When I'm reading a nonfiction book about like social issues, which I've been really enjoying in 2024 and 2023, I kind of want them to cite things. I want them to cite studies. I want there to be evidence of what they're saying. And like he even says in the book that his evidence is, what do you call it when it's just like hearsay? There's like a specific word that I can't think of it right now, but you probably know what I mean. But basically it's like, it's what he's heard and what he's experienced. And that's fine if you're like talking with a friend, I feel like. But if you're like publishing a book with your thoughts on like the serious issues that America is facing, I just feel like you should have more than anecdotal evidence. That's really what it is. So that to me felt kind of lazy, and I was interested. He was trying to help us find ourselves and be comfortable with ourselves and our own opinions. He's like, that's the most important thing, that everybody live and let live, and that everybody is themselves. I just realized the phone is a little bit crooked. And while I appreciate that, because I think that's something America has to be able to do, because we are a melting pot, we have to be able to live and let live. Freedom is important. Freedom of thought, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom for states to kind of decide certain things for themselves. I think all those things are really important. But it's not that, like I said, it's not that I disagree with him, but it was more like he was sharing an attitude and encouraging us all to just talk instead of people trying to shut each other up. He's like, stop trying to shut everybody up. That's not your job. Just be yourself. Let other people be themselves. The only way we're going to get through this really divisive time in American history is if we let everybody be themselves and talk. And he was like he cited, like one of the few kind of surveys that he cited was, people self-censoring. There's like a lot of people self-censoring. And it's like, I feel like that's kind of normal. Like, even in a free America, you should self-censor in some situations. Like, in professional situations, you should self-censor. If you're with a friend that you have, like, really deep disagreements with, and you know this about each other, I mean, you could talk it out, but not everybody wants to. Not everybody wants to go there. Maybe you want to talk about the things you agree about. Maybe you have plenty of other things to talk about. Maybe you're more like acquaintance level. We don't have to talk about all the deep issues. So I kind of appreciate the vibe of the book, but there wasn't a lot of evidence, so I DNF'd it really early. Like, I didn't even get to 10% because I was like, I think this is just a vibes kind of book, and I'm already there, and I don't need to, I'm washing my hands, I don't really need to read somebody's vibes if I already agree with them. I really read these books to try and get a different perspective, or to hear from somebody that I would expect to have a lot of disagreements with. And I don't really know what I was expecting from him. I expected we would have disagreements, but like Louise Perry, I expected to have a lot of disagreements with Louise Perry. And we do have some disagreements, but I was shocked by how much we agreed on. And I heard her in an interview saying some things where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we agree on these things. What do you guys think? Do you like the Octobuddy? I really like it. Anyways, point being, my room's really messy. Hope you don't mind. I would have kept reading if I felt like I was going to get a new perspective, but because there was no evidence and because I was like, I already agree with him on a lot of stuff, I just decided to DNF it. But that's not to say somebody else wouldn't enjoy it. I think if you're a Dr. Phil fan or you're curious about what he thinks, you might enjoy it. So in addition to the Octobuddy, which is now on my phone, Mimi also sent me volumes 5 and 6 and the workbook for lesson 6. Did she also send me 5? Or did I just buy it? I can't remember. Anyways, I have the workbooks, all the workbooks that I need, and I'm really excited. So I didn't buy workbook 2 because at the time I was using their free lessons on their website, but they're not free anymore. So I'm through level 2. I have book 3, which is, I have it out there because I'm using it right now. And then I'll be using their website subscription to finish level 4. I'm already halfway through level 4. But I'm backtracking to level 3 for a couple of reasons. But yeah, so now I'm all set through level 6. Huge thanks to Mimi. Hello there, guys. It is now Saturday, January 25th, and I was going to attempt to use my Octobuddy in the truck, but It doesn't stick to anything except glass, and the glass is tilted like this, so you wouldn't be able to see me, unfortunately. So I'm just gonna hold it like normal when I'm in the car. And I finished last night Spooky Lakes by Geo Rutherford. Geo Rutherford. I'm not gonna hold it up because it's kind of big. How am I gonna hold this? There we go. So she is a YouTuber, and I'm really excited not a YouTuber, she's a TikToker, and I'm really excited that TikTok isn't gone, because now I want to binge her videos. I did watch one while I was preparing, there's so much in here that I want to go like YouTube and Google, so I'm going to be doing that today before we return the book to the library. But yeah, there was even more. She does like every October, she does a Spooky Lakes series on TikTok where she talks about 31 spooky lakes. At least that's what she's been doing for a lot of years. I think she might not be doing that anymore. But anyways, this book was so fun. This is basically a STEM read for literature lovers, for people who like to just read, I don't know, other things. It feels like a very, left brain? Is left brain the literature, the creative brain, and right brain is the analytical brain? I don't remember exactly how that works, but it's science for book people. Because she just makes it really fun and accessible. There's a glossary in the back with really easily understandable definitions of scientific terminology, like geothermal. I never knew that geothermal was relating to the heat that comes out of the earth. So like there's really helpful definitions like that in it. And also, I don't remember how many lakes is in here. It's probably 31. That's like her theme. So she covers a bunch of really interesting lakes. Like there's this lake in Tanzania that literally mummifies things that fall into it, because it uses the same salt-based solution, like the same highly salty, I forget the word, saline, solution that the Egyptians used when they mummified their dead. It's like a really similar chemical reaction happens in this lake in Tanzania. I forget what the lake is called. It starts with an N. Lake N something, I think. And then there was a lot of like volcanic lakes described. Crater Lake was in there, which was really fun because I've been to Crater Lake and it was like one of my favorite places I've ever visited, I've ever traveled to. Really beautiful. And it has all these spooky things, related to it, like weird deaths that have happened there. And like there's a lot of also atomic, like nuclear waste type lakes, like from the Soviet Union, or mostly from the Soviet Union, honestly. Like it did have a slight bit of an agenda about nuclear power and how we shouldn't use it because the waste is too dangerous. But I think that there's a safe way to get rid of nuclear waste. It's just that the Soviet Union didn't do that. So yeah, I feel like the problem was the Soviet Union, not nuclear power. But regardless, it was like very anti-pollution, which I totally support. And but that was a very small part of the book. She didn't make it a preachy book. She just made it fun. She just made science really fun. So I enjoyed it so much. And there's a little hidden ghost on every page. It's very Where's Waldo, because spooky. So that was really fun. I always had fun like picking out the little ghost on each page in each picture. And yeah, it was really, really good. There was stuff about shipwrecks, like in the Great Lakes. But there was a lot of lakes that like weren't in North America, and so I'd never heard of them. There was a lot of lakes in Africa, because they have some really interesting volcanic lakes and stuff like that. So, man, the wonders of the natural world in Africa are just, I feel like I learned a lot about that. But there's some interesting stuff too, like there's lakes. There's one lake, I forget what lake it was called. I'm going to be Googling all this stuff the rest of the day. But I just didn't have a chance to do it yet. But this lake has like a bunch of bones all around it, and they're all from like different ages. Like the bones, some of them are just like thousands of years old, and some of them are like hundreds of years old. And so it's like, how did all these bones end up here? It's like a scientific mystery that we're not sure. It's a historical mystery. We're not really sure. So yeah, really, really fun. Highly recommended. Great, I think, for kids. I think boys would find this interesting. It feels like high interest, and it's easy reading. So it was really nice. I really enjoyed it. This is like one of the only physical books that I read this month. And it did take me a lot of days to finish it because I wanted to take my time and savor it, and I really did, and I enjoyed it so much. So highly recommended. So here's an example of one of the spooky lakes called Toxic Lake in Romania. They flooded the communist dictator who was in charge at the time. There was a town, and then they flooded it with a lake so that they could put the toxic tailings that were left over from copper mining. And so now it's like, oh, you can still see the steeple from the city. You can still see the steeple poking up out of the toxic lake. And apparently some Instagram influencers swam in the lake recently and got sick afterwards. Like had digestive issues and skin conditions. So that's pretty cool. Not. Here's another cool one, Lake Maracaibo, where obviously they get a lot of lightning. It's the lightning capital of the world. It says roughly 300 nocturnal thunderstorms occur here every year. Hello there, guys. It is now 11 a.m. on Tuesday, February 4th. I'm finally updating you with the last of what I read in January. I might have actually finished 2 things, but I'm going to save the other one for next month. And this is coming too late because I don't actually have a laptop, my laptop right now. So I haven't been able to edit videos, but that's just life. Sometimes you just put up something late. So yeah, I finished, and then we'll get to the February wrap up, the February TBR. But I finished White Nights by Fyodor Dostoevsky for my last read of the month. Reading finishing at least 2 Dostoevsky stories in 1 month was really good. I feel more energized to read classics now because this in particular I loved. So the double, I gave 4 stars. This might honestly be 4 stars, but it could be 5 stars. We'll have to see how it settles. It's hard to do a star rating because of course I'm excited, recency bias. And we'll see if it sticks with me. I feel like this is just so accessible, and I read an article, I think it was from the Guardian, that TikTok had made White Nights really popular because it's short and it's a love story and people can relate to that. I think a lot of TikTokers can probably relate to this because it's the main character is very alienated from the world. He has no like relationships or social life. And he's just watching other people go do stuff and kind of feeling left out. Like, why don't you invite me? But this was Tiffany's Patreon book club read. And I'm so glad that she chose it because, yeah, it was just perfect. It was perfect for me. It was so it's an hour and 55 minutes on here. And so this particular audiobook narrated by Edoardo Ballerini was really good. I really enjoyed Eduardo's narration, and I immersion read it, so I highlighted some stuff in there. But I thought it was really funny as I was reading it, but I didn't really understand it. I was like, this is so different from anything I've ever read by Dostoevsky. This love story, it's like, as Victoria put it, it's sort of like young adult fiction. It's like 2 young people going through their own journeys with love, and I really genuinely laughed throughout the story, and I don't want to spoil anything. It's so short, but it does sort of make fun of this like romantic idea of love that was really popular at the time. I forgot I was actually gonna read. I'll have to do it next month and maybe update you. There's a 5-volume biography by Joseph Frank by Dostoevsky. There's the condensed version, which I love, and I've read a lot of the condensed version. But there's also a 5-volume version that's not condensed that he originally wrote, and that is available on Hoopla. And it's hard for me to read on Hoopla because too much blue light, and I can't really read screens at night. So I'm waiting for Tiffany's Patreon, weekend reading challenge that'll actually be 4 days this time. So we're going to do reading sprints, 2 sets of reading sprints that weekend. And reading sprints are the best place for me to read something with blue light. So I'm planning on reading the biography material on this during those times. So I will probably update you with my thoughts on that next month, or rather this month, but February wrap up. But it's just suffices to say, this was so refreshing, and nobody loved it as much as I did, though. So I don't know. I think it just hit me right. It was just a relief. It was a breeze. I just enjoyed the ride, and I think I feel like this is a good place. I feel like every time I read Dostoevsky, I'm like, this is a good place to start with him, but maybe there just isn't a bad place. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I will talk more about it after reading the biography. So that's it for the wrap up, and let's talk about my February reading plans. So that sticky is my Octo buddy. I haven't actually showed you yet, but it's so great. I've been sticking it to everything, filming. I've been daily vlogging over on Instagram in Korean just to work on my Korean, and because it's Feb Regency, and I was like, I want to daily vlog my Feb Regency experience to some degree. So yeah, I've been using this a lot. And to suffice it to say, huge thank you to Mimi for sending me this. She also sent me something else, since I don't think I've updated you. She sent me another workbook. Did I tell you guys that? I can't remember. She sent me a workbook. Is it for level 5 or level 6? Anyways, she sent me a workbook for one of the levels that she sent me a grammar book for, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you, Mimi. Thank you. I'm going back through my older textbooks right now and pulling up all the vocabulary and making Anki flashcards for the grammar points that I have that are tricky for me to remember. At a certain point, Korean is just learning sentence endings and how to connect sentences with a certain feel, like, oh, I could do that, but, that kind of thing. Those kinds of, adding that kind of feeling into your sentence, it really helps you feel and sound fluent. Okay. So, plans for February. Sir Walter Scott's The Antiquary for Feb Regency. So I was undecided on a couple of these things when I posted my Feb Regency TBR. I knew I wanted to read something by Sir Walter Scott. I knew I wanted to read something by Mariah Edgeworth. I wasn't really sure what, though. So Dia in my Feb Regency TBR recommended The Antiquary by Sir Walter Scott, and I read it, and it sounds so good. It just sounded so good. I can't even really describe it to you. But I'll describe it to you after I read it. I'm terrible about describing things in my TBRs and book hauls, unless it's for work. Then I will put in the work to describe it for you ahead of time. But it's just easier for me to describe after I've read it, and give you my thoughts. So that is really nice because it's really short. And then Castle Rackrent by Mariah Edgeworth, which comes with Ennui, excuse me. I've always read it as Ennui, but I know that's not how it's pronounced. Ennui. So I already actually read Castle Rackrent in one sitting. I read it, but I didn't understand it, and I was like, I'm afraid to talk about this because I don't know what happened. I don't know what this is about. So I am currently reading all of the introductory material that I skipped in the beginning, and I know Ennui, and then there's 2 other novellas. They are all her Irish novellas. I didn't even realize she was Irish. So I will be talking about that probably at the end of this week in my first update for February. So I'll tell you about it there. So I might get to Ennui as well, but we'll see, because I also want to read The Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge finally. Oh, my mom's coming. She said she's almost here. And then The Social Contract by Rousseau. And it's really interesting because the introductory material about Castle Rackrent talks about Rousseau. And I'm like, oh, yeah. all of these authors were talking to each other and reacting to each other's works, just like I always talk about that with Dostoevsky in Russia. It was a very insular, writing scene over in St. Petersburg. Similar things were happening elsewhere in the world. So, and then next, and I'm so excited for this, so excited, The Question of Canon by Michael J. Kruger. So this is actually something I started last We Love Jenny, and I think I read the introduction in the first chapter, and I was really intrigued. However, I've been having a hard time reading exciting things at night, and this one is definitely exciting. So hopefully I can read it at night. Otherwise, I might need to fit it into my day some other way, because Christian nonfiction has just been my vibe lately. I've been enjoying it so much. So this Faith from Faith and books in her Discord, we're reading this. It's a We Love Jenny pick because Jenny and I had conversations about how the canon was chosen, and why it was chosen, how and why the canon of the Bible was selected. And so I was telling Tiffany about this conversation, and her husband, who is a pastor, recommended The Question of Canon, and then there's a second one by the same author. I can't remember what the second book's called, but he recommended them both very highly for talking about this topic. So I recommended it to Jenny, and so our plan was to buddy read it, and then we lost her. So this is one of those books that is like the culmination of a plan, just like the history of the Russian Revolution was, just like several other books are, like when Tiffany just read Annihilation. It was like, oh, I recommended that to Jenny. We were doing a project of recommending books to each other. So it just feels good to be reading those things, and I'm excited about it. Okay, next, Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones for Emma's Bookish Kingdom book club. And I also have The Bullet Swallower by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. This is a book that Victoria recommended very highly. And as soon as she talked about it, I knew I wanted to read it. But I didn't get to it right away. And so now is the time. Now is definitely the time. Because I need fiction audiobooks, and this is just perfect. So I'm going to pick that up next on audio. And then 100 Shadows by Hwang Jonggun. Boy, reading Korean in Romanized is tricky. This is for Crystal from Fiber Artsy's book club in her Discord. And this is a Korean book. She's doing an Asian book club. And so I'm really psyched to start a Korean book for her book club. And then Tiffany's Patreon, we are reading a French classic this month here called The Black Tulip by Alexandre Dumas. And we were originally doing every other month we would do a group read in Tiffany's Patreon, but lately she's decided she's going to do 2 group reads per quarter, and then at the end of the quarter we will talk about our favorites that we've all read throughout our reading lives. So I'm really excited for this format. That means I'll be reading more classics and probably more short classics. I just feel like this Patreon is tailored to what I need right now. Thank you, Tiffany. I do not actually care for Alexandre Dumas. I already started this and I'm like, why am I reading this? I didn't really like, what's his famous one? I can't remember. It's too long. So I'm going to try and read it with my eyes because audiobook is not working. So hopefully, though, it will turn out to be great. But I am excited to check out a short classic with everybody. And, I loved the last one and everybody was like, that was fine. So it's okay. Sometimes you don't love it and that's just how it goes. That is it, guys. But I do have, let's see, a couple things out. Oh, I just got 100 Shadows. Yes, I'm going to check that out. I'm reading Radical by David Platt. Can't wait to share my thoughts on that. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, which I feel like Christie's Purple Library might have recommended, and it is so hard-hitting and emotional. And here's Radical by David Platt. My Bible study is reading this. Troublemaker by Mark L. Clifford. So this is about Jimmy Lai, he's kind of like the Chinese equivalent of Alexei Navalny. I just started Venetia because I was like, I need something relaxing that's not emotional. I'm reading Crepúsculo, which is Twilight in Spanish, and finishing up Purgatorio. I didn't quite finish it. I have 2 cantos left. And that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching this. Let me know down below what your plans are for February, for Feb Regency or otherwise. And I'll talk to you very soon. Bye!